Dr. Renat Shigapov works as a data scientist for the NFDI consortium BERT at the Mannheim University Library with a focus on knowledge graphs and semantic enrichment and linking. BERT NFDI is a research infrastructure for business, economic, and related data. Renat is the coordinator of the working group Knowledge Graphs in NFDI section Metadata, Terminology, Provenance, and he promotes the use of knowledge graphs in NFDI as a key technology for implementing the FAIR principles and especially for ensuring interoperability. Maybe I should shortly add that the NFDI section metadata terminologies and provenance is a section that means that is across domain, across consortial group that works not only on text data and language data as Text Plus does, or on economic and business data as BERT does. So the question of knowledge graphs concerns different consortia, different disciplines, and is a question of how this data can be accumulated in a knowledge representation. And we are very happy that you will present us the results of this group so far and give us some impressions on how to think of knowledge in graphs. Renat, the stage is yours. The screen is yours. So.
Thank you, Philip. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we can see
because
I
don't see you, so one moment. Ja. Ich hoffe, alle können Englisch verstehen und ich will da weiter auf Englisch reden, okay? Okay, so I'm Renat Shigapov. I'm a coordinator of the NFDI working group Knowledge Graphs in section Metadata, Terminologies, and Provenance. And today I will talk about knowledge graphs for interoperable NFDI digital editions. I will not talk about my work in BERT NFDI because there is already a lot to talk about knowledge graphs in NFDI with respect to digital editions. My message today is very simple. If you need interoperability, use knowledge graphs. And I would like to share with you my thoughts and our work in the working group knowledge graphs. Why I say that if you need interoperability, use knowledge graphs, it's quite simple. So if we go at gofair.org and look at the conditions for interoperability, we see these three conditions. And the second is the most difficult. Metadata use vocabularies that follow the FAIR principles. If we take a look at data repositories, well, these conditions very rare fulfilled, and not even for all metadata, but only for a small part of it. But if you use knowledge graphs, you can fulfill all of these conditions. Knowledge graphs are a key technology for implementing the FAIR principles in data infrastructures by ensuring interoperability for both humans and machines, says our charter of the NFDI working group knowledge graphs. Today, I have three parts. In the first part, I will describe context. What is interoperable NFDI? In the second part, I will describe task given to me by Philip. What is interoperable digital editions? I will share with you my non-expert opinion about that. And in the third part, I will share the idea of a knowledge graph infrastructure as a service in NFDI. Let's go. So first of all, we'll talk about internal interoperability in NFDI. NFDI formally is 26 research data infrastructures with domain-specific metadata and data standards. Every icon here represents a consortium. For example, in Text Plus, the focus is on digital editions, lexical resources, and on collections. But for all other consortia, this research data is not in focus. For some technical consortia, more important electronic lab notebooks, for example. For social science consortia, surveys are the most important. And we can talk here about different levels or different degree of internal interoperability in NFDI. I mean, of course, it's a challenge to ensure interoperability in such a diverse infrastructure as NFDI. But we can say probably that the degree of internal interoperability would be low if consortia don't provide even portals for searching over metadata using the vocabularies following the FAIR principles. And I would say that the degree of internal interoperability would be high if consortia provide, first of all, terminology or ontology services, and secondly, metadata knowledge graphs for their research data. So dominant ontology plus entities. A part of internal interoperability in NFDI, the focus of the whole NFDI is external interoperability as well, with both national and international data infrastructures. There exist many different data repositories, institutional, general purpose, disciplinary data repositories. And there is a list of data repositories at re3data.org. Ideally, NFDI should be interoperable with all those data repositories. And we can mention here two very important APIs. So OAI PMH interfaces, which are used for harvesting, and also Spark endpoints, which represent knowledge graphs. If we want to make NFDI externally interoperable with all those international and national data infrastructures, the data repositories in NFDI should have those interfaces as well. And what are the measures on improving interoperability of NFDI? There are a lot of them, actually, and they existed just from the beginning of NFDI. For example, there exist two technical sections: common infrastructures and metadata terminologies provenance. And in section metadata terminologies provenance, there exist 5 working groups, and all of them in principle aim for interoperability in NFDI. And a part of that, there is so-called consortium base for NFDI, which is coordinating creating base services in the whole NFDI. And I would like to mention here 3 planned base services aimed for interoperability in NFDI. First is harvesting and findability enhancing services, which will ensure that every data repository in NFDI has OAI PMH interface. Second is terminology services. So it's a kind of single point of access to terminologies or ontologies in every consortium. And also knowledge graph infrastructure as a service, which will ensure that every researcher, institution, and consortium can easily create knowledge graphs and provide Spark endpoints. That was interoperability in NFDI. Now let's talk about interoperable digital editions. I'm not expert in digital editions, but since Philip asked me to take a look at them, I took a look at them. I took a look at the Text Plus registry of digital editions and at a Right journal, at a review journal for digital editions and resources. And actually, I was very surprised. I was surprised how beautiful some of those digital editions are. It's a kind of masterpieces, actually, from point of view of design, and it's a joy to read those digital editions. From my non-expert view, a digital edition is a beautiful website with editions of textual and non-textual data. And some digital editions have also registries of entities in these digital editions. And these editions contain annotated metadata and data using an ontology, for example, CDOC-CRM, and they contain links or annotations to identifiers in knowledge graphs, for example, in Wikidata or German authority file. And data is provided via API or bulk download in community-driven format TI, XML, which is great. And a registry of entities has entities like persons, events, organization, places, works. That's also very nice. So actually, if your digital edition has already these green boxes, it's already very good, very good. But here missing something. So, or let's say at least something can be improved. For example, this registry of entities in the editions is almost a knowledge graph actually. So you have a structured data, you have a part of that, you have structured metadata in your TEI files. So why, I mean, I will not say why, but just let's make one step further and let's create a knowledge graph from this metadata, including your registry of entities, and provide access to these metadata via Sparkle endpoints. I mean, that's a relatively tiny step, but it will enable reusing metadata of your digital edition by both humans and machines. So it will make your metadata and registry fair. And then you can provide additionally RDF metadata dumps, which would be great. Those are my 2 cents. And if we talk about long-term interoperability of digital editions, I think here we should mention 3 points. So first of all, it's important to make your workflow for creating digital edition reproducible. And that's reproducible workflow can be stored at GitHub and GitLab. A part of that, the digital edition itself with TI files, with API, with Sparkle endpoint, if you create a knowledge graph, can be, yes, stored anyway in internet. And if we talk about archive digital edition, it would be great to have a kind of text plus data repo for long-term archiving, where you can store your archive digital edition. Or you can store it, of course, as Zenodo. Now, let's talk about the idea of a knowledge graph infrastructure as a service. Of course, there are blocking factors of using knowledge graphs. From 2 parts in my talk, it became clear that in NFDI, knowledge graphs are very welcome. In context of digital editions, I think knowledge graphs would be awesome to use. But there are blocking factors in using knowledge graphs. And one of them is limited manpower in the research project. That's clear. I mean, a researcher wants to make its research project using the tools which he or she knows and finish in time, and then there is no time to invest for knowledge graphs or some other technologies. Second blocking factor is relatively complex technology stack. Though RDF and Sparkle exist for many years, but still learning curve is quite difficult still. And third blocking factor, I would say, is inertia. Inertia in everyday research practice. So we're used to do things the way we do in past. And because of this, we would like to have an NFDI-driven knowledge graph infrastructure as a service, so that researchers, institutions, consortia can easily create knowledge graphs without huge investments in manpower or learning super complex technologies. So first of all, such knowledge graph infrastructure should be easily reusable by providers of this infrastructure. So as providers of this infrastructure, we think about data centers, institutions, consortia. Secondly, it should be easily usable by knowledge graph creators. So every researcher, let's say in digital humanities, who wants to create a knowledge graph for a register of entities and in a digital edition can easily use such a knowledge graph infrastructure and create a knowledge graph. And thirdly, for that, we want to have a consultancy on NFDI level on knowledge graph creation. So far, this kind of consultancy was in site working group knowledge graphs, but it would be nice to make it better via existing base service initiatives. So our goal in this knowledge graph infrastructure proposal is to satisfy the knowledge graph needs of everyone in the German research data landscape. I mean, NFDI consortia, institutions, universities, and potentially all researchers. I don't have time to explain all the technical details, and that's not the point here. So I would like to point out to this proposal, which is available at this link. And for all of you who are interested in creating knowledge graphs or in reusing potential knowledge graph infrastructure at your university or your consortium, please consider to subscribe to our mailing list of our working group, where we will send additional information about that. And we will invite you for our next meetings where we'll discuss this knowledge graph infrastructure regularly. And there is a link to our charter. And if you have any questions about knowledge graphs or reusing knowledge graph infrastructure in your projects, feel free to contact me via email. And here are takeaways from my small, tiny talk. First is knowledge graphs play an integral role in achieving interoperability in NFDI. Second, knowledge graphs could improve interoperability of digital editions. And third is NFDI, knowledge graph infrastructure as a service aims for fulfilling knowledge graph needs of everyone in German research landscape. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking for questions.